some solutions that have come forward that I've worked on with when I worked at the tribal college out there was to retain some of the economic decision making at a centralized level, but disaggregate some of the political thinking and allow and try to make room for local communities to be to voice representation, and so that's been one solution put forward so far. Other proponents have put forward is to put both of those powers into the local authority and disaggregate the central authority. This has its benefits, you know, that anarchists will point them out, but this is also can be interpreted as a form of neoliberalism in terms of devolution of the state apparatus and what happens when you devolve the state is that you have NGOs come in who are unaccountable for the local communities to fill the void that the state used to have. So there's costs and benefits to each approach in that respect. How much more time do I have left? Or should I?
No, you have plenty. You have 10 more minutes.
Oh, okay. So, all right, what I wanted to address, so that kind of gives you a little bit of the framework and the dynamics of, and some of the considerations to our approach. So, what other background issues inform our decision about which way to approach this question? I think one that, an obvious one that we're trying to address here is history and the history of colonialism, and the way in which tribal governments have been set up. And so when we talk about this, how do we approach this issue with respect to indigenous knowledge and indigenous culture, we still have to take into account, unfortunately, the ways in which tribal governments have been set up. So what I mean by that, it sounds really vague and ambiguous, but what I mean by that is tribal governments, for at least the Navajo government, since the 1950s, roughly. I mean, earlier before that, their first extractive leases were signed in the late 1920s and 30s. But really, a boom in extractive resources began on the Navajo reservation in the 1950s, starting with uranium. And what this did was it created a really big state apparatus, right? And so it increased the bureaucracy of the Navajo Nation tribal government. There's a good and bad to this, right? The good is that, in fact, a lot of the welfare programs coming out of the New Deal could be administered through this. It protected cultural integrity by allowing tribes to organize loosely under what was this is kind of under federal Indian relations, but what was called the Wheeler-Howard Act, the Indian Reorganization Act. So by allowing tribes some more autonomy than the kind of the patron system they had previously, they were able to provide wage labor jobs while at the same time protecting their cultural integrity. That sounds like I might be making a stretch there, but I think if we teased it out, I can make a defense for that claim. But so what happened is that we created a huge government that did a lot of good things, like what I mentioned about the culture, and also by providing jobs and services, welfare services. But it became dependent on extractive resources. Uranium at first, natural gas after that, and presently coal. And so you have this situation in which a lot of people and a lot of services and a lot of things that make really impoverished people's lives a little bit easier, come from having a big state government. And if we can maintain some sort of democratic oversight over it, and this is where Roxanne and I were talking about how to transform the Navajo Nation into something more socialist. We can maintain some sort of democratic oversight over some of these larger, for all intents and purposes, nationally owned industries. Even though we partnered with private corporations, the rights that we have in that partnership are nationally owned by Indian tribes. And so, if we can think creatively about this, then we might be able to give people that suffer from the legacies of colonialism some tools to just make their lives a little bit easier. Other proposals have been to not go in that direction and to think more in terms of cooperatives. And Roxanne and I we're talking about that with I think we said a goat. That's right, a goat milking enterprise. And there's this other economist who worked on the reservation. Her name is Lorraine Ruffin, who also proposed solutions like this, where we took things that are called traditional, part of what was the traditional economy for Navajo people, and turn them into a cooperative type approach, meaning that local communities organize together and retain their rights politically and economically there. So these are the two models that we're kind of brainstorming right now in this approach. I know it doesn't seem to address what is the indigeneity aspect of it, but I think the important thing to know is that in fact indigeneity is a lot of different things, and for the Navajo, from the Navajo circumstance, the best way to respect indigeneity is to appreciate the nuance of the nuances within the context, meaning, the legacy of tribal governments, where people actually are, and what kind of changes can be made to get at that. So in conclusion, I think we're still trying to figure out how to balance between a socialist approach and something that we might call an anarchist approach, and also to have that gain some currency on the Navajo Nation within the tribal political apparatus. These things we can talk about it, but whether the tribe follows through on it is another thing. So what I wanted to conclude with was I don't know if these are the best words, but I don't know how many of you have read James Scott's books, Seen Like a State, but in the end he says what we need to do is make small reforms and see how that works. And I don't know, that seemed to have that seemed to be like a practical solution in certain ways, but I don't think it's something we can do all the time. But yeah, so that's it. What do you mean?